Right. We'll go ahead and call our workshop to order and begin the meeting. I appreciate everyone being here. Let's start our meeting and just say Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have a few items on our agenda to discuss. I've asked Dr. Crystal Miller to join us today and give us an update on the syringe exchange program. Also have guests from Bluegrass Tomorrow with us, Mr. Rumpke and Claude Christensen, and Joe Kane's with them as well. Then we're going to talk about our vacation benefit, possible adjustment to our admin code, and then we have guests from Harp Enterprises here as well. So have a couple other items to address as well. So we'll get started with Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, welcome, and appreciate you taking your time to come see us and give us an update on the syringe exchange program.
Happy New Year. So we're 6 months in, hard to believe. We have seen a total of 40 participants. We are seeing return clients. We have a total number of visits of 124. We have referral sources. So when I say referral sources, I don't just mean treatment. I mean maybe to the hospital for IUD. Maybe it's a clinic service that we do. So we've had 38 services. We've our average age, I know there was a concern about that. Our average age is about 30, a little higher, 33, 34, depending on the month. Half men, half women. So
I asked you yesterday when I called just to confirm you coming about were any participants under the age of 18 are identified, and you said there was zero that reflected that.
That's right.
What other questions does anyone from the court have in regards to the update with the syringe exchange program?
Crystal.
Which means some of those people have returned, obviously, which is important because we're building trust with them and we're able to link them up to other services, which is obviously an important component of it. So the other things that we've done, we've secured some grant-funded positions to work on education on harm reduction. So you're going to see a little bit more of that on our end. We've been working with Brandon and EMA, Georgetown Police Department on infectious disease training, and we have developed an opioid response plan. So in case we have a mass event of overdoses, we know how to respond to that and who's responsible for what.
So the needles we're giving out, how many are we getting back, maybe percentage-wise?
So right now we're about 50-50. It takes about 3 years. It takes about a year to be 1 for 1. So we're at 50% right now.
And we've got several places to dispose of those, or is there, I know that was some questions we had early on.
So when they come in, they get a sharps container. So when they come back in, I mean, we educate them on how they can properly do that if they don't have their sharps container. But we give them a sharps container. It's small, and they're to dispose of it in there. And then when they come back, obviously they give us that. We give them a clean one, and that's how we dispose of them. So.
Okay.
From your perspective, is it working?
So 25%, one of the things I didn't tell you, obviously the point of this program, developing this program, was to tackle the hepatitis C outbreak. 25% of our clients are reporting to us, either self-report or we test them that they are hepatitis C positive. So the goal is to link them up to care and to educate them on how they can protect themselves and their family and loved ones from spreading that disease. So, education is important from that piece. That's a very large component of this. It's not just about handing out needles, and people get tied up into that, but really it's about reaching these people and educating them on the importance of safety and keeping them and their families safe. So, yeah, I mean, people are coming in and they're returning, which means we're building trust.
Cool.
Any other questions? Dr. Miller, we appreciate your time, and if you need anything else, please yell at us.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Claude Christensen and
Mr. Rumpke to step forward. And how are you all this morning? Glad you're here.
Morning.
Good to be here, thank you. I think first off, we're interested in addressing any questions you have. I know you've seen the material and the resolution, et cetera, and we're interested in certainly trying to do our best to answer any questions or alleviate any concern about this effort. So we can start there. The document is, from our viewpoints, kind of a motherhood and apple pie thing. We have two things we're really trying to accomplish. The first is to establish and identify common ground between all the parties that do land use planning in the 18 counties around Lexington. The second part is to improve communication between those parties. And so right now the status of it is we're going around and getting buy-in, if you will, or adoption of the resolution. And have on a number of other legislative bodies and planning commissions that have said, yeah, that's a good thing, and we buy into it and we approve of it. So with that, if you have questions, we'll go with that. Start there.
And I did bring copies of the resolution and of the land use principles if you need those. So I don't know if you all are up to date on it or have.
Yeah, I've shared, met with Claude, and I shared the documentation with all the court.
Okay.
And I think we discussed it in a workshop, I believe. What questions or comments does any court members have for Claude or Mr. Rumpke?
I have a question. First of all, is Woodford County involved with this?
Yes.
Okay. So some scenarios that I have to deal with, part of my district that I serve touches Woodford County. And so there are things going on across the county line in Woodford County that affects my constituents. And in theory, what you're all proposing is to get everybody on the same planning, I guess, guidelines as far as in terms of that. But I have really no jurisdiction. Scott County has no jurisdiction with what happens in Woodford County. Explain to me the benefit of why why there's things that we should all do this together. I'm trying to grasp the autonomy that each county has as far as their planning versus what your all's goals are by wanting us to pass this resolution.
Well, I'll take this one on first, Claude, but that's exactly what this is all about. One of the strategies, and we just finished on December the 5th a summit relating to this resolution and to these land use principles as well. And the borders are key. One of the things that we want to do is develop, and this will be in cooperation with the Bluegrass Ad, but GIS mapping, looking at how the land uses are similar or not so similar on our borders, and how we might be able to match those up. It's about communication, as Claude said. One issue that brought this to the surface a couple of years ago is when they were building the new stockyards right on top of the Royal Springs Aquifer, and there was no discussion between Fayette County and Scott County or Georgetown and Lexington. And Mayor Prather brought that up. We got involved. We got the parties together, and a lot of the due diligence was done at that point in the environmental and those kinds of concerns. You had a similar scenario with Bourbon and Fayette County relating to the extension of the runway at Bluegrass Station, and there wasn't discussion between parties on that one. So getting people on the same page is a big part of this, and really educating elected officials, planning commissions, et cetera, about what's going on around the region and how we can collaborate, cooperate, and communicate.
But this document is not, the specific situation I'm talking about. Woodford County puts a factory on on a country road that's right next to Scott County, and it's going to add another 200 cars or 200 people come to this factory. They didn't reach out to Scott County, and I don't believe this resolution, just my opinion, is going to, I hope it does, but I don't believe.
And that's
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
Well, right now, we have nothing. They don't have to talk to us.
Right.
If they sign on and we sign on, then at least we've agreed the principles that are contained therein are good principles and ought to be considered. And if a county or another entity chooses not to, they have that right. We're not addressing sovereignty. That would be, this document would be DOA if we try to do that.
Right.
What we're trying to do is push forward or promote best practices. And that means, okay, these principles, the ones that we're talking about in the document, they're all good. We ought to all be using them. And do you think so? Do you agree? Well, okay, yeah, we agree.
What would be step two? Like everybody signs on to this resolution, and everybody agrees to it. So, what happens then? Is there a committee formed among
there's
magistrates?
There's a land use committee, Bluegrass Tomorrow, whole host or sponsors a land use committee that meets monthly and talks.
Who is that made up of, though?
There are planners on there, a couple elected officials, other stakeholders in the area that have chosen to participate.
And private corporations?
No,
No, I don't think,
no, really, it's,
Business community members? So who would be the other stakeholders?
yes,
I mean, there is no specificity in this whatsoever. It is very generic, and the question he just asked is very valid. There's no blueprint of what's to happen. And the thing is too, is like with Lexington, well, until Lexington expands their urban service boundary, all they have is infill. Whereas we're the fastest growing county in the state, or the top 3, and all we're doing is growing by leaps and bounds residentially, which doesn't pay for itself with property tax.
right.
So my concern is more about where is our county going than it is Woodford or Fayette or anybody else, because until Fayette County says we're gonna push out our urban service boundary, the growth pressure on us remains. So how does that do us any good to enter into some kind of land use agreement when we know that the fight of the urban service boundary at this point in time is not going to be pushed out? Nobody wants to do that. The Planning Commission wants infill. We have a different problem than Lexington. So how can we sit on the same side and talk about what our land use is, because
The idea
their
is-
problem is not our problem?
The idea is to talk about it. This promotes the conversation.
But what's the blueprint? I mean, unless there's like
That's to
some
be determined by
long-term.
the stakeholders.
well, and the stakeholders are a number of the organizations that have from the very beginning started this, that being Bluegrass Tomorrow, the Bluegrass Area Development District, the Fayette Alliance, Woodford Forward, the Bluegrass Land Conservancy, Farm Bureau. These were all the original partners. All of those partners serve on the committee or the working group. Most counties, especially the contiguous counties to Lexington, have either planning representatives or other representatives that are on it. We're asking every municipality and every government to appoint someone to serve on this committee. And there is a blueprint. The blueprint is to be determined in the strategic master plan for what we are trying to do. It has absolutely nothing to do with creating a regional land use planning commission. It only has to do, it has nothing to, it has to do with growing responsibly and doing that together and understanding what's going on across our borders. It's important to know what, even though, we're not going to come out and say what Lexington or Scott County needs to do or should do. That's not any part of this. But you understanding what's happening on your borders and with your neighbors is what's most important. So coming out of that strategic planning summit that we just had on December the 5th, some of the communications piece is being mapped out in a blue plan, a blueprint. And really some things that, in terms of mayors and county judges beginning to get together on some kind of a regular basis to have these kinds of roundtable discussions, as well as elected officials that would invite you guys to sort of like a leadership Scott County scenario, but it's related to what's going on in land use and land use planning in the region, so that there's a great understanding of what's going on in the whole region.
Is there an existing land use planning framework that you are promoting?
No. No.
Well, that,
The principles that we've got in the resolution, that's where we're at right now.
yeah.
This is a baby.
But in the resolution, it says, key to establishing an effective and mutually beneficial land use planning framework. I would like to, have in my mind what that looked like before I entered into going further. Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah, because if you don't have, if you don't know what you're getting into, that's exactly the situation with this resolution, is you don't know what this means. It's got pretty language, it sounds good, it's a resolution, so it's easy to walk away from, but you have no idea what you're getting into, and then you're turning over, as a court, you're turning over all the discussion and potential agreements that might come before us regarding a land use that we haven't been involved in the entire process, so we may not understand all the nuances, and the recommendation's gonna come from P&Z and from this group and from who knows what else, and at that point, we may not be fully educated on what's happened because we're not involved in all the conversation.
But you could be.
But we can't be. We can't all be involved.
Why?
Well, one, we can't show up as a quorum at a meeting
Right.
and participate in discussion. Two, we all do have other jobs outside of this. And three, we're not the planning masters. That's not what we do for a living. That's what Joe and his group do.
And they bought into this.
Well, that doesn't mean we buy into it,
That's
because
right.
there's a bunch of us that aren't happy as fast as we're growing in the manner that we're growing. So what happens, how many, so there's 18 counties in the ad, correct?
Yep.
How many have passed the resolution? Or is this a situation where, hey, Scott County passed, it's the fastest growing in Kentucky, you should too?
Lexington, Fayette has,
Well,
Urban has.
again, Lexington, throw them out, they can't compare.
We're not gonna throw them out.
No, I'm saying they can't compare to everybody else. Nobody else in this region has the same issues and problems that they have.
I mean, that's very true. The others that have passed it are Bourbon County, City of Midway, Woodford is at about the same spot you are right now in terms of us working with them. The Fayette Jessamine MPO has passed it. Scott County Planning Commission has passed it. And we're really still at the front end of this. These things do move slowly, and you have to get through these kinds of discussions. But I think you're bringing up a concern, though, that's never really going to occur. It
does talk about a master plan or a.
The master plan has to do, and I can even show you this, because this, and if you pass this down, this was the agenda for the summit, and you'll see on that last page the afternoon session and what we were discussing and what the master plan is going to be about. It has nothing to do about any land use decisions that we would be involved with. What we are doing is simply promoting communication, number one. That's the most important thing. Even in this resolution, every bullet point in that resolution is something that's already in your comprehensive plan and in the comprehensive plans of all the counties in our region, except for the communications principle and the principle at the very end that talks about this group continuing to do its work to facilitate communications between the counties. Our job would only be to point out that this company is coming in on your border. It's your job and Woodford County's job to make decisions that are best suited to them and to their neighbors. So,
And
that's as far as we're gonna
That's where
go.
the common principles come in, is, okay, we've decided this set of principles seems to be a good thing for land use planning. And the communication piece is Woodford and Scott should talk to one another about what's gonna happen, and then collaborate as appropriate. So we're telling people what we think they should do, or what will work, not what they have to do. No mandate, there never will be a mandate. Well, not what this is
So when
about.
we're talking about a plan, we're not talking about a land use and zoning plan.
I don't know that there'll
It's
ever be
not- it's
a
not
single
that.
framework document come out of this. I don't know that that'll ever happen, because that begins to flirt with sovereignty issues in the various counties.
But it says, principles is key to establishing an effective and mutually beneficial land use planning framework. I agree that's, in principle, that's
And that's all we're saying.
that's a great thing to put as a goal. But, what does that look like? And then what Dwayne said, what are our next steps? What's step two? And Chad, I think the question I have to ask right now is what does the court want to see before they would consider, making a motion to adopt this resolution? What are the other things that you want to hear, or is there anything that could make you want to adopt this? Or what other items or questions that you need answered before we consider it?
Clyde, I want you to be sure that you understand kind of from our position where we're looking at, I don't know, last week or a few weeks ago, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, Fayette County just approved another 5-year contract with WSB to bring garbage into Scott County. Did Lexington reach out to Scott County and ask if that was okay? Judge, did they reach out to your office?
No, but I reached out to them.
And so, I mean.
And let me make sure the record reflects that I addressed my concerns about that as well, and how it was negatively impacting our community. And that did not change that decision.
Well, I appreciate you, and I put you on the spot there. But understand that, we've had these issues going on, and this resolution, in theory, sounds good and makes me feel warm, but some of the practical matters that happens in the processes, that's where we're delinquent in. And I don't know if I don't think this document's going to fix that.
Well, I think the outcomes, though, can help that. I think, the next steps are to take the recommendations that just came out of that summit and begin to work on those, begin to implement those, begin to develop the communications strategies that we talked about there. And I do believe that those kinds of issues may come up before decisions are made, and at least that discussion takes place. And I think that very point that you just made is almost a yes vote for the resolution.
Yeah, but Fayette County voted yes for this, and we're delinquent in reaching out to.
And you can point out, or could, if you have passed this, wait a minute, you guys agreed to do this.
And there's nothing in place right now because we're working to pass the resolution first before we begin to develop these strategies. So you have to create consensus that it's needed. What we're asking you to do is say communication is needed. That's what this resolution is saying.
And this set of principles.
Shouldn't we have
is
that
good.
without having to have a resolution?
You should, but you
I
don't.
mean,
But it hasn't.
it's just common sense.
Yeah, we agree.
It is, and I've been working in the region. You know, I've run the Richmond Chamber of Commerce. I worked in Frankfurt for 5 years. I ran the Woodford County Chamber of Commerce. I've been working the region and with Bluegrass Tomorrow and other organizations for the last 25 years, and we don't communicate. I think this is one of the most important things that Bluegrass Tomorrow or the region could ever do is put together a framework whereby we are working on that communication. It's like working on a marriage. You got to communicate.
But it also goes back to, I think Alvin and I may have been the only one on the court, or Bill, you may have been here when Lexington was trying to lead the charge for all 18 counties to start their own ad.
Yeah.
You know, and tried to force the issue. We didn't want to do that.
Right.
Why would we want to do that? We have, our rural area has very different situations than Garrett County. Garrett County has virtually nothing in common with Lexington.
Correct.
And so, you know, it's just things over and over again over the last 10 years, from our perspective of sitting up here, that we have a little history on it, and it even goes further back than that, that if we haven't had communication, a piece of paper with a resolution that everybody said, yeah, this is great,
Not
is
gonna
not
fix it.
going to change that.
It's the strategies that come out of it that will.
Well, it's
You know.
the stakeholders within the four walls of the building downtown in Lexington changing that will change it. Because we can go to a CAECO or a magistrate's conference or a judge's conference and talk to our fellow elected officials within the ad district. Except for Fayette. There's no one there. We never have conversation with them. They never are at the same places that all of the 18 counties surrounding Fayette County are at. So if we're not having direct communication with their elected officials like we do with all these others, how does that doesn't help us, even with a resolution. It doesn't change culture, and passing a resolution will not change culture.
You know, Lexington has a county judge, and I think all he does is administer the road fund. I met him once. But that's, other than that, I mean, what, I call the mayor of Lexington and say we got a problem? It's a little difficult to get your arms around.
It is.
And I've been to several city council meetings, and I can tell you, with all the 100% honesty, they don't give a flying snap what happens in Scott County. All they care about is Lexington.
You know, I think with the new administration in Lexington, which is much more favorable to the region, and the 12th district council member Kathy Ploman has been very involved with this whole process, and she was the chair of Bluegrass Tomorrow before Claude, and is very interested because the 12th district is the one that touches all of our counties. Very interested in communicating with our counties. And I think there's a different environment there right now. And the opportunity is there to develop a framework of communication. That's what we're proposing to do. If we don't pass this resolution, the strategy of passing this resolution, especially in all the contiguous counties to Lexington and the cities contained therein, it is and was to create a momentum and an enthusiasm for talking, for communicating.
So let me ask a question. How many counties do you want in this? 10, 12?
Really, when you look at, if you have seen any of my presentations about this, You know, we talk about the best cultural lands in the bluegrass counties. That's the main framework in the counties that we are targeting. So you've got the contiguous counties to Lexington. You've got the counties that go right down the 127 corridor, which is all really great farmland, all the way down to Boyle County. Those are the most important to us. Others come on and wish to sign on to this resolution, that's great. But really, it's about 10 counties that we're talking about there that have this precious farmland.
So what happens if, of the 10 counties you mentioned, 8?
As a matter of fact, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just saw David pick up that program. The counties are on your.
Yeah, I counted, there's like 16 of them.
Yeah.
So maybe it's 14, but, so what happens if 12 pass and 2 don't?
Well, I think we still continue on with our work.
Move forward.
But I think it's really important. Scott County is very important to us. Woodford County is very important to us. We already have Bourbon, we already have Fayette. We have a little bit of adjustment right now because of the MPO. But all of those contiguous counties are extremely important.
I think what's important on this for me, sitting here as well, is on your working committee, how many are elected officials? And if the resolution is passed, how many elected officials would serve on whatever you want to call it, the board, the working committee, whatever?
Right now, Claude, you are no longer an elected official.
That's correct.
Kathy Ploman is the only one on the working committee
Right
that's
now,
an
yeah.
elected official. LFUCG 12th District. But we're really encouraging elected officials to be
The door is
involved with
open.
this. Any of you or one of you that would want to serve on this, we want you there.
We know what doesn't work, and we know what doing nothing will do. And do nothing.
What will it do, though,
What?
doing nothing?
The same-
What will it do for us?
You'll get the same result you've got,
Which is,
not communication, non-communication. Finger pointing.
but again, if Fayette County has passed this and they don't pick up the phone and say, they know our issue here. The mayor is
Then
very
shame on them.
well aware of our issue here.
And shame on them if they've
Well,
signed
that
on
doesn't
and
do
then
any-
back away.
That doesn't
that-
do anything.
When
Nothing you can do
did
about
LFCUG, when did they adopt the
that.
resolution?
First one.
Was it in August, September?
It was August.
Yeah.
Here's a copy.
We just think
Got 'em
maybe
from
trying
the-
something new might be a good thing.
Yeah.
That's all we're saying here, is let's
And
communicate.
I hope you understand the concerns that have been voiced and
I think we all agree, yeah, communication would be great. I think, and I'm new onto the group, but they haven't had it.
Communication Needs to improve. Let's start there.
but it does bother me that if they adopted this and then knowing the sensitivity, like there's no way on God's green earth that they don't understand the sensitivity of what's going on in northern Scott County with our landfill.
Well, because it's not in their backyard.
And that's probably the case, but I don't want to speak for them. But, I picked up the phone and called directly because I think that's the best way to deal with things and say, hey, can we talk about this? And express my concerns and expressed, there's a variety of things that could have been done that could have helped our situation and possibly reduce volume at our landfill that would positively impact it. And on this resolution, it says, reasonable environmental sensitivities, address relevant cultural heritage and natural resources, tourism needs. It's talking about being collaborative and balanced and based in shared responsibility. And for them to adopt that and then not step out.
up when the-
Yeah, it just is a concern to me. But two wrongs don't make a right. And I do believe that you're trying to promote communication. I think I don't think the court's going to say, okay, let's pass this right now. What I think we need to determine is what circumstances or what information would you need to be added to this, or to consider it. And if you don't want to consider it, if there's not the will of the court to do that, then we need to move on. We don't need to keep going over something that doesn't have support. So are there things that you would like to have answered before we further consider it?
One of the things, well, actually, everybody who has passed this to this point has put basically their own resolution as a cover page and determined this is why we are adopting this framework. And then the Bluegrass Tomorrow piece is added to it as an attachment. So, I would encourage you to do that you would have that cover page with signatures and what have you, and even some of the concerns that you express might be a part of that. I think that makes
We
it work.
included a sample resolution you can use or not. The resolution, that the Bluegrass Tomorrow resolution, was passed by our board. And so what we're saying is we're looking for an endorsement. And you can do that in your own words with your own resolution, and that's fine.
Well,
Say whatever you feel you need to say, assuming that's what you want to do.
there could be possible value in us putting into form a resolution about communicating on land use planning when it impacts other counties and other entities.
Opportunity in that resolution to say things like that.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions, then I'll be in touch with you all and reach out, and I'll talk some further with the court, and then we'll go from there. All right? Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next, Jeff Mudrack, would you share with the court, we've shared this once before, this is just for discussion in regards to a possible amendment of the admin code to reflect a change in regards to the vacation benefit. Yesterday, Jeff has met individually with department heads and constitutional officers about getting input on this. And then yesterday, we had a department head meeting, and constitutional officers were invited as well, and we discussed this and how it would impact employees. And I'm just going to turn it over to Jeff and then go from there.
Okay. Well, and as you recall, one of the purposes that we did this study was based upon the climate study that Judge Covington did at the start of 2019, where vacation leave was questioned as to, opportunities for improvement there. So that kind of led us to the study, which was completed. I believe we did that in August, and I think I presented it to the court around October last year, so somewhere around there. Just the findings of that survey, and I have the results of that survey on my computer, so if anybody wants me to go back and show you that again, I'd be glad to show you the results of the survey, just what all the other counties were doing, including Georgetown City, and what our current policy is and what we were proposing. So I could put that on the monitor if you'd like me to do that too. But what I have in front of you now is the current policy is the second page, and the draft is on top, of course, of what we would like to do going forward. And so what you can kind of see here is we changed the tiers a little bit so the tiers would be from 0 to 4, 4 to 10, 10 years in a day to 15, and then 15 years plus would be the tiers for vacation leave earning. Right now, during your first 10 years, if you were working 35 hours a week, you only earn 70 hours per year, whereas I'm suggesting that we change that to 84 hours for 0 to 4, and then from 4 to 10 that you would earn 105 hours. And right now, the current policy, so if you look at the second column showing where the 35 hours is, the current accrual rate is 105 hours per year, and I'm proposing that between 10 and 15, you earn 126 hours, and then at 15 plus, you'd be 140. So, but you can kind of see the number of days. It'd be 12 days, 15 days, 18 days, and 20 days in those tiers. As far as other changes to the policy, right now, you don't earn any vacation leave till you've been here for a year, or that's when it's finally credited. What I'm suggesting is that we also credit it on a monthly basis, so that you earn a little bit every month, and then by the time you've been here a year, you end up earning the same amount, so there's no difference in how you accrue it. It's just that we're giving it to people on the front end versus making them wait a year.
And a prime example is this. The mother or father of a student wants to go to a school event, and they've been here 3 or 4 months. Instead of them having to try to navigate that, they can take part of a day and go to it. They've been here 3 months, they've been here 4 months. It makes more sense to, in my mind, to credit them incrementally instead of just annually.
And my guess, too, is that right now our current policy is making a person use sick leave instead of vacation leave for those absences, which isn't what we want to do either. So I think it kind of helps address that. Also, what we've put in here is that a person can start using vacation leave after 3 months. So if they've accrued it, they want to take a week off, then as long as when they get their time built up, then they could, take off some time instead of having to have to be here for a year before they can take any time off. Also, a major change to this policy, too, is a provision. I probably remember me talking about this last time, it's near the end of the second paragraph. Unused vacation leave may be carried forward into the next calendar year. However, any balance in excess of the current annual accrual rate will be forfeited. So what this policy will also let us do is carry forward, 1 year's worth of accrual into the next year if they have that much. But they have to use that time by the end of the following year, otherwise it's lost. And I think we can get the programming set up so that, I think if you remember last time, I talked about just capping it at 160 hours, but we're going to try to get that down to where it's just whatever that person's current accrual rate is, the max that they can earn. So to put that in perspective, if you're at 0 to 4, you could carry those 12 days from 1 year to the next, but you got to use them by the end of the following year, otherwise you lose them. But it's unlikely that a person would probably have that they would carry forward all 12 days, is my guess anyhow. So
what's the back end effect? So let's just say that you have all these hours and you're a 20-year employee. So then essentially, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out, 3 months of sick time, vacation time, or whatever it's built up. Can I then retire? And then my official retirement date would not be until I used up all my sick time. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Sure. It wouldn't affect sick time, but I have that covered in the 4 items at the end there. You only get paid out for what your current annual accrual rate is. So the limit to this is if you're earning 20 days per year, the most we're going to pay you out for is 20 days of vacation.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Yeah.
So, but you have to be paid out. You can't just.
You could schedule your vacation and then schedule your retirement after your vacation. I think that would be within the bounds of the policy.
Yeah.
But it's different from somebody trying to burn their sick days that they've not used before quitting, which we discourage doing because it's not the way it's intended. But if somebody wanted to, they've been here 20 years and said, hey, I'm going to retire, but I'm going to take 2 weeks vacation before I retire, that's their business.
Yeah.
They've earned that time.
Yeah. Well, what about the increments in which you all deduct time? If like the judge used going to see a kid's performance at school, do you all make them do like quarter of an hour or quarter of a day? Or,
well,
I'm trying to see if the system makes sense, like a quarter, half, 3/4, or
and
full.
it's covered in a sentence in the middle of the second paragraph. Typically, leave is used in at least 1 hour increments, and some departments require use in a larger increments, such as 2 or 4 hour blocks.
Well, would it be better if we put it in, you see the example of quarter, half, 3/4 of a day, or a full day? I mean, I just want to make sure that the manager, whoever the managers are and the directors are on board with not having to be a clerical issue where they're having.
Will you all sometimes have more so like like somebody schedule a vacation at a 12-hour block if they want to schedule out and say, hey, I just want to do a 12-hour block. Is that kind of common with you all? And what about EMS?
So like for us, once again, this kind of goes back to school programs. We've had some individuals with, especially elementary schools, starting, at 7:30, 7:45 in the morning, that says, hey, I want to go do something in the morning with my child, and I want to take half an hour vacation. So we've allowed that smaller increment of vacation time. But as far as, we
Chad,
other than that, it's usually half an hour is what we usually say.
Yeah, that's, I don't think you'd find that anywhere in the private sector that you're allowed to take half hour.
No,
Well,
most time
I
it's
do.
4-hour blocks.
Huh?
I do.
What, private sector?
I take half hour all the
Yeah,
time.
but I'm saying you're not gonna find it, it's not a normal occurrence.
Are you all wanting to
I think that's an admin code situation where we have to go back and look at that.
this is going to
Yeah.
amend the admin code.
So the most vacation you could ever have is 3 weeks, correct?
No, it'd be 4 weeks would be the most.
Okay, so how many years do you need to be here to get 4?
15 years.
Okay, that's fair. I didn't see that in here.
Front page.
I thought it said after 11 years.
Well, that's the current policy. The proposed would be, and that's something else that was a source.
But what we really want to do too, you all, is we want to be able to
Okay, yeah.
fix physical soft and physical pay
Oh, I guess that's our current
so that employees can easily see how much vacation time that they have, and we're going to be working on that as well.
And I guess a couple other points too. When we did this study, what you'll find is, and it just worked out this way, but what we're proposing here is exactly what Georgetown City does and the state does as far as accrual rates. So it's not anything
The state of
unusual.
Kentucky and the
State
city of
Kentucky,
Georgetown.
yeah. So that, that makes us more competitive there. And just so you know, some other statistics to look at is our current median length of employment is 4 years and 1 month. So people aren't here a long time.
Hopefully they will be.
And that's what I'm hoping that this will do, is have a positive
Keep good people.
impact on that,
So
honestly.
what does the wording look like that, this isn't, are you taking this page and sticking it in the admin code?
Well, to replace the second page is what the current wording is.
Well, and the reason I ask, because it uses the word typically, which is kind of open, subject to interpretation, and the last thing we want to do is leave anything subject to interpretation.
Well, do you want to say leave must be used in 1 hour increments? That's what you're saying.
Well,
I guess what I'm trying to do here is give people some flexibility, honestly.
But I don't see any. But I don't see any problem with us saying that leave should be taken in an hour. It just makes it easier to keep up with, kind of. That's what you're saying.
Well, what I'm thinking about is in terms of coverage, and I don't know, maybe I'm in the school world, but think about it like this. If we have a paramedic that's going to be gone for an hour, it's going to be difficult to get a paramedic to come in for just an hour to cover someone. I think you got to make it worth their time.
Most of the known universe does it in 4-hour blocks. Okay, and if you have to take off an hour early to go to a doctor's appointment, then you just take off an hour early.
That's
You don't get paid for it.
And that would be sick time,
So,
Don't even use sick
Chad,
time.
it kind of goes back to what you're stating there. I look at it, and I would hope Mike and probably Tony would see the same thing. With the emergency services, we have to fill those gaps. And, our goal is to reduce overtime. Well, when somebody does take off, whether it's a half an hour or an hour, we have to fill that, and that's going to be somebody working overtime for that vacation. And once again, it kind of comes back to trying to be flexible with our employees and allowing them to have that flexibility that, hey, I don't want to use up a lot of my time, but I do want to go see my child in the morning, or I need to leave a half an hour early for whatever reason. And that's my whole point, is because, once again, trying to get somebody to come in sometimes is hard, and that means that, we reduce a truck for whatever time gap that might
But
be.
if we increase the hours as far as in what you can take, will that entice people, or are you still going to be stuck with the same situation?
You mean
For coverage,
Whether it's a half an hour or hour is what he's saying.
Yeah.
If you go to like hour increment versus a half an hour, still the same issue, right? We're gonna have to pay double. We're gonna have to pay overtime.
But the longer increment we make a person take, the tougher it is for Brandon to cover.
To fill
his
it,
feet.
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get established is it harder to, let's make it easier on the whole team, right?
And I think what
Part of the
David,
suggestion came from the department heads, said they would like this in here, so if we need to take it back out.
but I think what David is saying is remove typically and say leave should be used in at least 1 hour increments. I mean, is that what you're saying, David?
Yeah.
And
I can gladly do that.
I don't think that's I don't see how anybody can get anything done in a half hour anyway.
Yeah, but by the time you drive, go someplace, there, get back, yeah. It's
So
ridiculous.
is there any other questions or discussions other than that change that would you all would like to see before it's brought back next week for vote?
Judge, I just want to say, I think it's good that for the new employees, how they do the monthly increments, that's going to be beneficial to them to, going a whole year without vacation. It's kind of,
No, I think it's very positive.
yeah.
Jeff, I appreciate the effort and thanks, and we'll bring this back amended as discussed.
Will do.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Next, I have been contacted by about a dozen people by email, phone call, or Facebook message. And the concern or question was, what is Scott County Fiscal Court's stance on some legislation that has been pre-filed as bills in the state legislature? And it all circles around Second Amendment rights. And I've had, a string of contacts, and I reached out to you all via email to ask you all if you all had been contacted by individuals and got a little bit of feedback. But I want to share just what my response to the emails that I've received, and then go from there. I appreciate people reaching out to me and helping me be a part of a solution when there's an issue. And in this regard, just let me read you my response about the Second Amendment sanctuary issue that's been brought to me. Let me first say, when I took office, I swore an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth. That includes my belief that the Second Amendment right of all individual citizens to keep and bear arms should not be infringed upon by the federal, state, or local governments. And, I've had just a short time to do some research, and a lot of this is from what's happening in Virginia in their state legislature. And the difference, what I see between Kentucky and Virginia, is that Kentucky holds, the Republican Party holds super majorities in both the House and the Senate. And a lot of those individuals value the Second Amendment right just as I do, and I think many of our court does. And I reached out. Instead of just wondering, I called Senator Thayer, I called Representative Maddox, Representative Pratt, and asked them about the pre-filed bills and if there was any traction or concern about those bills, making headway into possibly becoming law. And all three of those representatives assured me that they felt like none of that would have any traction, and they didn't anticipate any of that legislation that would infringe upon the rights of citizens to keep and bear arms to have any traction. So, I've continued to be emailed and asked, would the fiscal court consider a resolution that would declare Scott County a Second Amendment sanctuary? And I've got a draft that I'd like to share with you. Bill, what comments do you have?
The resolution has absolutely zero force of law.
And that's the truth.
I mean, state and federal law would still always.
Supersede any local ordinance?
They preempt anything we can do.
Correct.
So as long as the Second Amendment is not being infringed upon, or It's not being challenged in the state or the federal government. I don't see any need for us to do anything preemptive.
Would you do me a favor and discuss your background also, so that it's on record of your service? And
I spent 26 years in the Army and took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took an oath to obey all legal orders, and carried a weapon for 26 years, okay? No one ever told me I couldn't carry a weapon, and here we are, okay? So the Second Amendment of the Constitution says the people's right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And as long as that right is not being infringed, or any threat of being infringed, I don't see any reason for us to do anything preemptive and pass a resolution that means absolutely nothing.
And the draft that I put together, all it says is the Scott County Fiscal Court wishes to express opposition to any law that would infringe upon the rights of the citizens of Scott County to keep and bear arms. That's, everything that you're saying I agree with.
That's cut and dry.
But I felt like, being contacted by individuals. I didn't know if you all had been contacted by individuals.
Judge, I have been contacted, but, this is a lot like when everybody wanted to declare a county a right-to-work county, okay? These are things that are not in the county's purview. These are things that need to be done at the state level. And for us to come up and say we're going to vote to make ourselves a sanctuary, Second Amendment sanctuary county, I don't think we can do that.
my other question is, Rand, does this would only apply, this resolution would only apply to non-incorporated county area, not within the city. Would that be correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
So it doesn't affect, so Georgetown would have to do something similar.
Judge?
Sheriff Hampton?
Yeah, so I was approached with this same situation several years ago about the Second Amendment. And I think what you're trying to do is just address it and make everybody comfortable that we support that. And that's what I did. I didn't do a resolution or anything. I don't have the ability to do that. But I met with a group at the library, explained myself and where I come from on the Second Amendment. I also issued a statement on Facebook, and everybody seemed to be satisfied with that. I just wanted to throw that comment out there, and I think that's what, Judge, you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So,
Well, another thing that I worry about is, are we going to do a resolution every time somebody wants a sanctuary for whatever other thing?
Exactly.
You know,
And again,
to feel good about whatever other issue. I mean, when are we
resolution-
going to stop doing resolutions for sanctuary this or sanctuary that?
A resolution has zero force of law.
Well, the number one thing I felt like was important, to reach out to the people that can make decisions. And that's Senator Thayer and our reps, Savannah Maddox and Philip Pratt. And, they assured me that they did not feel like any of that would have any traction and would have any chance of even maybe getting to the floor, those pre-filed bills. But what Tony's saying is correct, that, I'm trying to be responsive to folks that have reached out to me and assure them that we don't support any legislation, but that would infringe upon their rights to keep and bear arms. And you are correct. This body has no legal standing in that area right now. So, any other questions or comments? And I'll continue. When I'm contacted by multiple folks, I feel like it's my job to share with the court, and that's what I've done. Next, we have guests from Harp Enterprises here, and Rebecca, would you like to introduce and talk about what we have here today?
Good morning. I'd like to thank the court for entertaining this. Our representative, Bobby Gantley, he's our representative, has been for many years, but currently the president of Harp Enterprises, so we get the best of the best there. and we're pleased to have him here with us. But as I say, he's been our representative for many years with our election services and equipment provider. We were just discussing this. How many years has Scott County used this election services provider? And we're guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30-plus years. So a longtime trusted vendor of ours. It's more than just a vendor. They offer substantial support on Election Day. So we're looking at potential need for new voting machines. I don't want to get into this too much because Bobby is going to be giving a presentation, but our voting machines are aging out. There's some other issues with the machines that we have, and I'll go ahead and let Bobby address that, but I wanted to thank the court for your time on this, and he'll be giving a presentation, but if you can stay after and maybe get a hands-on demonstration, I think that would be really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Judge, members of the board, for letting me be here today. My name is Bobby Gantley. I am the president of Harp Enterprises. Harp Enterprises has been in business for 47 years. We started out as a printing company. We evolved into an election services company. Currently, right now, we service 96 of 120 counties in the state of Kentucky. We do have 28 counties in Tennessee, 5 in Indiana. So right now, we're really busy. This is going to be a busy year for us as far as that goes. And what we're seeing here in front of me is our new Verity voting system. Now when I say our new Verity voting system, we are the official reseller for Hart Civic. Hart Civic is the manufacturer. They're based in Austin, Texas. They build it right there in Texas. There's nowhere else. It ships in, built in Austin. We made a relationship with them in 2005 after the Help America Vote Act came to be. So in that, we were looking for a vendor. We already had an established territory here in Kentucky and other states. We partnered with them, and that's the current system that you're all voting on. You have the e-slate where you go in, you get a code, it has the little wheel. Then we progress to the e-scan with paper ballots as far as that goes. So in the grand scheme of things over the years, that equipment started out in 2005. Currently, Scott County houses all their equipment at our facility at Harp Enterprises in Lexington. Okay, it's under lock and key in a separate room in our warehouse. Only 2 people have access. Temperature, heat, air control. About the best location you can have. There's other places in the state, not as convenient, not as clean, more issues with machines. But we're talking going on 15 years with voting equipment. There are issues arising across the state with this equipment. It's just like no one carries an iPhone 30 anymore. It just is what it is. Parts fail. You did. Let me start over.
Okay, don't say flip phone either.
Maybe I should say BlackBerry. Thanks for that. But as things are going on, there's more issues with security that have come up. There's more issues along the line. But the biggest instance that we've seen in the last probably 15 to 18 months is what's called a voter verified paper audit trail. You may have heard about it. It's been in the news. A lot of states started doing it. The state of Kentucky, State Board of Elections said that no county in the state of Kentucky can purchase any voting equipment going forward unless it has a VPPAT, voter verified paper audit trail. What does that mean? At the end of the day, when the voter casts his or her ballot, they have to physically hold a piece of paper and it has to be scanned into a machine. What that means is that there was ever a contest of an election, recanvass, recount, there's a court order, you're pulling a physical piece of paper out and counting it, doing risk limiting audits to compare what the numbers on the machine verified on election day. That becomes the source. They're saying paper is the only way to go. 10 years, 17 years ago, when I started at Harp Enterprises, the e-slate machines that you all currently use, outside of the scanners that had the wheel, you get the code, it's all electronic. Voter sees that. It has a review screen. You hit cast ballot and people walked away. Well, there's doubt in the community that those votes, are you actually seeing what you're getting as far as that goes? So that's the biggest push on this as far as that goes with paper audit. So everything with this new system, as far as the paper goes with this scanner, it's basically set up the same way. So voters in Scott County, and I'm just going to branch out, let's just say half of you all in fiscal court here vote paper ballot. You go into the precinct, you scan your driver's license with the, you all use the poll pads, correct? The iPads. You're starting. Or the roster book. Then you go to a privacy screen, you fill out your little boxes, and then you take it over to the scanner, drop it in, okay? Nothing with that as far as the voters changes. You can see the setup is different. All of these machines now are touchscreen calibration. There is a wheel over here. So none of this is really the same. The setup is a lot easier for the poll workers. We went to, well, Hart InterCivic did common language for the voters and poll workers. When it says you have one more choice, it doesn't say 4 more choices. It goes down. Very easy to read for the voter. The biggest difference in this system is right over here. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of how they work and the numbers wise. In your packet that I gave you, you don't have to open it up, but there's information. This is called Verity Scan. This is Verity Touch Writer. There's another piece of equipment I didn't bring. It would be for the clerk's office if you absentee ballots, called Verity Print. Also has some language in there with our partner Hart InterCivic. And there also is a quote in there right now of what the system right now, what it would cost as far as that goes. We can get into that. But with this particular machine here, Verity Touch Writer, state of Kentucky, anyone can use a handicap accessible machine, any type of disability machine, and that's what this is for. What this machine does though, this is not a voting machine. It's called a ballot marking device. So in theory, everyone is scanning a ballot into the precinct scanner no matter what. Whereas before, now you can vote on the e-slate and you hit cast ballot and you walk out, okay? This doesn't store votes, it stores audit logs because a ballot is being printed over here. Now, you're probably looking at this and saying, wow, we're in the 2020, here we are. Why is there this big printer sitting here beside this machine? Looks like a lot of equipment to have in the precinct, okay? When Hart InterCivic developed the new Verity voting system, one of the main things with, and this was the main response that they drove this forward, was with the ADA community. The ADA community, when they go in to vote, you can have headphones, sip and puff, just like this as far as that goes. But one of their main responses to voting machine to vendors was, we're not getting the same type of ballot that everyone else in the county is getting. So as of right now, we print at our facility in Lexington all the ballots for the clerk's office, whatever they want for precinct. And this is basically what they look like, a pad of ballots you've been issued for. Okay? So once they do that, we print all those as far as that goes. The ADA community on other systems, what happens is you go to a machine, you're given a card that's about this size. It's inserted into the machine, it comes out, and then it scans in. Well, let's think about that. It may not happen here, but there's a lot of counties that use any type of disability machine. You may only have one voter that uses it. Everyone uses paper. So let's say there's a recount in any election. We got to pull these ballots out. And they pull them out and they start counting them, and it's A101 precinct, whatever. And there's 100, or there's 99 paper ballots, and then there's this one ballot with this card that doesn't match anything else. Everyone in the room knows that so-and-so, handicapped person in that precinct, or some people are going to know how they voted. So Hart, the reason for this printer is that everyone gets an 8.5 by 11 ballot. This is what comes out of this printer. And I'm going to show you how it works, how it marks. I can pass that around. So you fill in your boxes just like any other voter. It then prints out those selections, and then they would be scanned in to the machine. And that's been a huge thing with the community as far as that goes. There's different changes on that as far as that goes, but I'm gonna go ahead and use this real quick just to show you. It does have privacy screens. I didn't bring them so you all could see this. So there is privacy screen for the voter when they come up and vote, just like it is now. So a poll worker would come in, they would set this up for the voter, they would activate their ballot, and then it would have the different type of splits, and I'll get into that and how that works. So they walk in, and it says begin voting, and everything's touchscreen. This is set up as a general election. We've been using this for about the last 2 months as far as that goes. So it has straight party and things like that. So what I was talking about with the screen, with everything, it tells the voter here, the number of remaining choices you can mark is 1. And it has it in red, so it tells them 1. So you go through it. They can press that. There's no more with the wheel. If they want to use the wheel, everything is set up for any person with a disability in a wheelchair. So if they had to be down here, it can plug in the headphones, a sip and puff if they needed that as well. But you can see even the scanner's lower. If someone's in a wheelchair and they fill out their ballot, they're not raising up trying to find out where that goes as well. Okay? So I'm just going to keep making selections. If someone is colorblind or anything like that, I can change the font on the screen. So it's easy for them. Another ADA capability as far as that goes. You can change the text size if they do that as far as that goes as well.
As far as cybersecurity, is in any way this machine hooked up to the internet, to connect to Wi-Fi? It stands solely by itself. Obviously, it goes into some drive, all the information, and then that drive's taken to Rebecca's office, and they're all compiled to.
And that's correct.
engine
So
right now.
first and foremost, and that's usually one of the first questions we get, and I'll let that go until someone brings up. They're not connected to the internet. Second thing, where we build all of the databases at our office in Lexington, they don't come from Texas. Everything happens at our facility. We print the ballots. We build all the databases. Our programmers who build each database for each county, their computers are in single kiosk mode, okay? So they're not connected to the internet. So every database then it's taken over. I actually have a physical person who comes here to Rebecca's office, sets up the database for election day. Now, since we store the equipment, well, Scott County does at our facility, we set it in-house as far as that goes. With the rest, we have 3 other counties that store theirs as well, Clark, Casey, and Jessamine. But the other 92 counties, we physically go to every county. And the media for every county is hand-delivered. Nothing goes through the mail. It's hand-delivered by one of our technicians the day that they set the voting equipment, as far as it goes. But you are correct, it can't be connected to the internet. And actually with this system, the software on the back side, it's Windows 7 embedded. It's the only system on the market today that has Windows 7 embedded. There's other competitors trying to get that. They don't have it yet. And this is the only system that uses whitelisting. Whitelisting basically says whatever we're going to put on here, nothing else can come in. A lot of people use blacklisting, which blocks off any other attempt. Whitelisting is we're only going to allow X, Y, and Z on this platform. That's the only thing that can run as far as that goes. So I'm going to skip to the end here.
Jason, I'll just say that the one complaint I get about your all's machines is the wheel, because people want to use touchscreens because it's so prevalent today, and that's a move in the right direction.
Which is, so anyone could use this machine. It's more geared toward the ADA community, just like what it is now. So it's going to ask, you cannot make any changes after you print. Do you want to print? Yes, print my ballot. Now, this has been on since before the meeting started, so it takes a little bit of time to do that. Now, one thing with this printer, we are close. We're about 15 minutes from our office to right here as far as that goes. So what this doesn't replace printing all of your ballots in the precinct on election day. This printer isn't made to do that. And while this is heating up and getting ready to go, one thing about this, you see this with this Oki printer that Hart InterCivic developed. This is
Everything that they do is commercial off the shelf. Now, that doesn't mean you can go to Walmart, Best Buy, and buy this and stick it in, because there's certain firmware we have to put on it. But the reason that they went this way is for the life chain and everything like that as far as down the road. Because this system that they're projecting right now is 15 plus years. You know, they don't want a system every 10 years we come back and have to go in front of the fiscal court and be like, well, your machines are failing. This is the reason as far as that goes, to do that.
So in our bid, is there just gonna be one printer at each spot
Well, that's-
and one scanner?
That's where I'm going with this. I was just printing this out. So if someone used that, they come back over here. One thing that's different on the eScan, you can see these green lights, landing lights. I've seen voters, I've gone out to the precincts, training classes, and they walk around and they try to do this and this. Hart made a guide here for the paper, only 8.5 by 11 across, upside down, backwards, forwards. It doesn't matter which way the ballot is scanned. So the voter stands there, your vote has been recorded, thank you for voting, the American flag, and then the green lights go forward. Back to your question as far as that goes. And that's how we are working with all the counties in Kentucky. Currently, we have 10 counties utilizing this system for the May primary going forward. What we're doing is you have to have a scanner for each precinct. But with the ballot marking device, because it's not a voting machine, what we're trying to do and convince counties to do this as basically a cost savings is, let's say, polling locations. How many, let's say you have 47 precincts in the county? 46? Okay. 46, you have 30 polling locations. We don't need to go 46 and 46.
Right.
So you may share. With this machine here, I can add 2, 3 precincts. Trimble County, small county up north, was the first county that bought this. She has 12 precincts. She utilizes 2 schools. 6 precincts in a gym, 6 precincts. 1 machine here and 1 there. We could have sold her 10 more ballot marking devices, but it's a waste on the county's money, and we don't need that as far as that goes. So that's one way to decrease the cost on this going forward as far as.
I just foresee somebody folding their paper, jamming that up, and then what are we gonna do?
With this?
Yeah.
Well, that's just like with the current machine that you do now. You know, that's part of training with a poll worker, a judge coming over. A judge can't sit over here and look at a voter's ballot or anything like that. But if it's folded up and they notice that, they're like, you know, you have to unfold your ballot to do that. As far as jams go in these machines, I mean, you know, no one, if they're, you know, I mean, if they wrinkle it up, it's not gonna go in anyway, like a ball, as far as that goes. There's instructions that they have, you know, for the training. But if they do, usually the ballot kicks back out, you know, as far as that goes and tells them. That's one thing with this guide right here on the current paper ballot machine that you all have. It's kind of just a bigger tray as far as that goes. If people walk in, they can kind of skew their ballot and it will kick back because it's not reading these barcodes. So that's why they put these guides in here on that. One other piece that I have in that packet that I gave you, it says what's in a barcode. And the only reason we bring this up is because this is going across the country, and Colorado banned one particular vendor out of this. You see these barcodes up here in the corner, okay? In this particular system, that basically tells you what precinct that we're dealing in, things like that. Where this is a problem across the country is all the selections that are made on the ballot, in other systems, they're embedding your choices into these barcodes. So there's no human that can read barcodes. So they're looking at it and say, well, I voted for Tony Stark here. Well, I'm not saying it is or isn't, but that's not really where the vote's being captured. On this system, what's on the paper in these races, that's where the scanner is capturing a digital image front and back of the actual vote, as far as that goes. So that's one thing that's very important that's going across the country that we're telling folks is, you're gonna see more and more about this. These barcodes are your votes embedded in barcodes, and they're not on this system as far as that goes.
Let me ask you a question, because I saw this up, I think this happened up in Spencer County at a special election representative race or something along that, maybe it wasn't a special election. So let's say you vote straight Democratic Party, but then you also bubble in Tony Stark, who's the Republican Party for Congress, okay? First, how does that machine read that? And then the second thing is I think this is the one that in the representatives race, they only like scribbled in like half the box. And there was a question of whether or not that vote was for that person or not. How does the machine read that?
So with your first issue that you're talking about,
Yeah.
they voted Democrat straight ticket. And then they voted Republican in the first race, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So individual races supersede the straight party vote, okay? So if you go in and you mark Republican, the Republican gets the vote there. Every other race that's not marked gets a Democratic vote as far as that goes. And that's how it always works. There's a lot of confusion. It will come up, it won't happen in the primary because you don't have straight party voting, but every general, especially 2020 with President, Senate on the ballot, US Rep, all the way down to anything that's local here, which will be. How does that work if it's partisan? And we just had it this past general election. No, but if I vote this, then that changes everything here. It's not. Individual partisan races supersede the straight.
And our
party
machines
vote.
currently, they do that, does that read it the same way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to. That's EAC certification. That's even above it. As far as the mark that you're talking about, I mean, to see that, you know, you could take a mark, a lot of people have done this, and that's why we always tell people fill in the box. Don't drag a check mark because you're going into another, as far as that goes. If there was a slight mark in there, and I don't know unless I would actually see it, the machine would either kick it out as an overvote or didn't pick it up. I know now one thing that they did enhance on the scanner for this, if you actually just take your pen, because people do that because they want to test the equipment, and you just dot that and kick it out, the machine will kick it out, basically saying, I don't know if there's a mark there or not, and it won't accept that, then the voter has to. One other thing, and I was telling Rebecca, Kenna, and Amber about this on this particular machine now. You get to an election, especially this year, you're gonna have ballot or races on the front. You're gonna flip over, and usually a city council's gonna fall in the back, vote for 12. Well, some people, they get into their booth, and they see that, and they vote, and they go up here, and they vote, and it's gone. Then they get home and say, well, did you vote for so-and-so? You know, he's running for city council. Well, no, my ballot didn't have it. So then they start getting phone calls like, I didn't get that race on the ballot. Well, it was on the back page as far as that goes. What this machine can be set up to now, if someone forgets, it will put it back out and let the voter know there are races on the other side if you want to vote them. You don't have to vote it. You don't have to vote anything. I can vote a blank ballot if I want to. But when you get into multiple races, the size of that, that's one huge thing. As this technology grows, the technology is getting higher, but it's basically better plain English for the common voter, so they're not getting anything. We're trying to take every step possible to let everyone vote for everything that they have.
So, any other questions from anyone on the court?
Judge, do we have to put this out for bid?
It's a good question. Rebecca?
I mean, I know we've used HARP for a long time. It's just a legal question.
I would think we'd have to. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's any exception to that. Or is it a professional service that's limited and, or are you on the state list?
No, I mean, most counties have put it out, you know, anything for bid. Some have asked for bid specs, and some ask for our bid specs because they don't want, and I'm not trying to sway anything, you know, to do that. I just finished 2 bids for 2 of the largest counties here in the state to do that bid proposal as far as that goes.
Can I ask you a question about
Yes.
how many competitors have this exact system? Will there be differences if bids are put out?
Oh, yeah, there'd be absolute differences in how the
What is
equipment.
the one of the
Well,
card if you install?
the number one thing on our system is the only one for any handicap accessible that's getting an 8.5 by 11 ballot. Okay, there's no other system out there that does that. We think that's a huge thing. The ADA community thinks that's a huge thing as far as that goes. You know, the only other thing, I mean, you have a great question doing that, you know, putting it out for bid, and that's fine, and not going on top of that. You know, the only thing is, as Rebecca mentioned, They haven't, you all done a great job, like the clerk's office has running elections as far as that goes efficient. But things happen on election day. This past governor's election, we printed 32,000 ballots on election day, okay? There's no other vendor in the state that can reach their customer base and provide that. And we didn't have to print ballots for Scott County, but we drove, I think the furthest we drove to meet people 2.5 hours, and we do that on election day. So to be 15 minutes from there, I live here, I actually hand deliver your all's ballots here to that. You know, I think that's one of the things that we take our pride ourselves on at heart. It's not selling voting equipment. If we had to do that, we would have closed business 35 years ago out of the 47. Our whole model is service and support. You're gonna need new voting equipment 15, 18 years. And then what happens after that? You get the equipment, well, have at it. There's some companies that do that. They'll come in and train you one time. Election day service, we provide someone here every election day to do that. So, and not going off on a tangent.
Yeah, I'm not questioning your service. I'm just questioning whether where we are legally.
I would say we'd have to put it out for bid, but I'd have to depend on Rebecca and her staff to help us with the specs and what the need is and putting that together.
I think that's likely what we'll be looking at. Legally, if we need to put it out for bid, absolutely, that's what we'll do. I think when it comes down to it, we won't find the same exact comparison amongst vendors, and so part of that equation is going to be where the preferences are with equipment and services and those sort of things. That will be essential in looking at that with the bid process.
But the need is real. Your machines are aging out, is what you described them out. And could you speak to that?
How many machines are there? How many machines do we currently have? Is this number?
And then you have the Dallas.
Yes, and then we have 48 or 47 now.
So you got roughly 147 pieces of equipment.
Is there any
How many
city
pieces of
machines,
equipment
or is it just
will
all, it's all county?
this system require?
I have it in the quote as 30 and
53.
53, is that what it, okay, so 83, so we're cutting, 60-some pieces of equipment, basically, as far as that goes. Can I speak more?
Yes, please.
The main thing that we're seeing across the state, and it's because it's the E-Slate, the one that has the wheel, the screen that you do that, just because they're older in the case. Some of it's how they're being delivered. Looks like the case is pretty sturdy. There's cables on the back side of that. The screens are going out. They were the first system to come in. The E-scans are holding up. Usually don't have a lot of problems with the scanners actually. But from early 2005 is when those came in across the state as far as that goes. So that's mostly what we're seeing. And then the parts for it. Now, Hart Civic hasn't quit, they quit making new equipment on what you currently have. They still have parts for that. But eventually they're gonna end of life that system. They're not gonna run two systems at once because they're gonna try to do that. So I do have enough parts that I can get from them, and then we currently have it hard to do that. But to say in 3 years, I'm probably not gonna have that. So at some point, the need now probably is greater, but that's gonna be up to the clerk's office and then you all to make that decision as well.
Okay. Well, I'll just start with that. In general, our machines they're getting age on them. As we know, technology will have to be replaced. We have some repairs every election season. So, that being said, some of our machines are, they're 15 years plus. So, as you know with anything, a technologically based instrument is not going to have a lifespan a lot longer than that. So we've got that general issue. So it will be something to face. Why sooner better than later? I think I'd just like to maybe kind of enumerate those issues. And what you just spoke on last, there's still a market potentially with other counties for our equipment that we currently have if we replace it. That market is going to dwindle as we move forward. So there's some money that we get back in return that can be put toward the purchase of these machines, because we'll be able to sell some of that equipment that other counties that are not looking at replacing their machines or going with this new technology as of yet will be interested in those voting machines that we have. So a better market to sell those at this time. So that's an advantage of sooner rather than later. Another issue would be putting to rest that controversy over all voters not having the opportunity to vote the same type of ballot. And for equality's sake, I can't disagree with that statement. I do support every election. I support, when questioned, that if I did not have confidence in both types of voting machines that we have, and just, Bobby has indicated those types of machines, but for clarity, the e-scan system, which votes paper ballot voting machine, the e-slate system, which is an electronically based machine. Now, something that he said earlier is another competitor out there has a ballot that's not the same, but it is on paper, it is printed on a card stock style ballot. So again, why improve but not go to the full extent and give every voter the same ballot? So I agree with that. But I wanted to point out that what we currently have, if it's not been made clear, or if you haven't recently voted on both types of voting machines that we have, if your preference has been paper, you've done that. If you went in and said whichever is fine, and the precinct officer directed you toward the e-slate, or we had a voter with disabilities that required the e-slate machine, what you would find is a strictly electronic machine. So while there is a printout or a receipt that would come out, if we had to quarantine these machines and a circuit court said it's time to open those up and look at the ballots, yes, we could take the ballots out of our current paper voting machine and look at those and see that the results that came out of the voting machine, the number of votes cast for those candidates, exactly matched what was on every ballot in that machine. So there's exact accountability. With the electronic machine, yes, there's a receipt that prints out the number of votes cast, but we no longer know what that ballot looked like. It was a strictly electronic ballot that the votes were then generated on a receipt. So yes, we have accountability, but I think you see the point I'm making. We don't have the actual ballots that were cast. It was on an electronic screen. It's evaporated. It's gone. So then the question would come in. I have full confidence in our vendor, but there's the question that needs to be answered. Did the programmer do this accurately? If we're basing it strictly on an electronic system, was there potential fraud with the programmer of the system? So every election, I support this and say I have confidence in both types of voting machines. One explanation or argument that I use to that is if I ever had doubts about that, if there were ever a question about voter fraud that occurred, the first thing I would do, I would go to that precinct, because I know from previous statistics that our voters in a very high turnout, we rely more on paper. That makes sense. We can vote more ballots at one time, long lines form, and more voters end up going that direction. In a moderately well-attended election, our voters vote about 50-50. So they don't necessarily have a strong preference unless there may be something circulating in the media that says your vote needs to be on paper. That particular election, I think you remember a couple of years back, we had voters insisting on paper, but that argument kind of dissipated. Our voters are back statistically 50-50. So the first thing I would do, knowing that, if I ever questioned it, I would look at the proportion of votes that came out on the paper voting machine in one precinct, and I would look to see that there were similar results from the electronic machine. And if there was a wide gap or difference, my first instinct would be to say, okay, let's look at every precinct and let's see if we've got proportionately cast ballots on our two types of voting machines. That would be one way to see if there were an issue, some type of programming fraud or something have you. But everything that I've just taken time to explain, I think you'll see where I'm going to this, goes away. All of those questions, all of those concerns about that, and ultimately it comes down to exact and equal equality for every voter. Isn't that what we all would most desire, that every voter is able to come in and have the exact same type of paper ballot, and that we have 100% accountability for our voting results that we print and scroll on that screen on election night, that if necessary, and if there were a question, we could go in each and every precinct, each and every voting machine, and get the paper, and we could qualify those votes and make sure that everyone's vote was accounted for. So how long do we want to continue that controversy if we have the opportunity? There's good reason because our voting machines are aging out, but there's also good reason for the argument that I think that I've just given. So also, sooner than later, we've still got a market for our voting machines. I think those would be the main projections I would make. Also, we were looking at what it cost in 2 separate purchases of our machines, purchased in 2005, purchased in 2008. 2 large groups of voting machines were most currently purchased for Scott County, and that's what we're currently using today, that total number that Bobby gave. The cost of that was about $465,000 with those 2 purchases combined that provides us with all of our current voting machines. You'll see in the bid proposal for this, we're looking at a little over 523,000 maybe. So you can see the difference of the purchase today that would put all the voting machines we need in all our precincts. There's not a wide gap from that purchase, 12 to 15 years ago. And we've got completely new and different and improved systems. If our vendor were simply producing new machines of the same type, I would have expected the cost to have gone drastically down. However, we've got completely new and improved systems that have capabilities that the other machines did not have. And the gap between that is somewhere in $60,000, $65,000 range. So while we definitely may need to look at putting this proposal out to bid, I would already comment to you that I've looked at some other systems, and I wouldn't have brought this system, I wouldn't have brought Bobby as our current vendor to come and project this system if I was not already in favor with this system in comparison to other systems out there. So I've already surveyed some of our options, and this would be my top choice. Now, I have no reluctance about bringing those other systems in front of you, for your view, if we come into that bid process. And I guess my question that would be, if we put out a bid proposal, if it is specific to what our needs are and what we're looking for, that may limit perhaps the number of bids that we receive. I don't know the answer to that question, but Rand, I would just look to you to help us guide that.
I think you can be as specific as you want to be, as you need to be to meet your needs, so.
Okay.
As county clerk, you're making a recommendation to the court
Mhm.
on what the specs you think are appropriate, and then we would vote to approve that bid, putting that bid out, and then go from there.
Well, absolutely. Then we deserve the opportunity, if there are other competitors that can provide the same system and similar services, then we owe ourselves that opportunity to look at those as well.
David?
Well, because there's obviously probably not a consultant that we can say, can you provide specs for us like you would with an architect or an engineer or something like that to be able to put a project out to bid. Is there a scenario, Rand, where we can interview different companies to allow them to tell us what their services are, what their machines can do?
Pre-bid.
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to, because
RFP
I don't think
versus
anybody up here is going to be able to write bid specs.
Could you do a request for proposal versus?
Yeah, versus.
Yeah, absolutely, we can do that.
David, I thought if she requested because of the equality, then you wouldn't have to bid it out because there is no other company.
No, you still have to.
I think you still have to do something.
There are other companies that do the same service, they just may do it differently.
Or somewhere
Doesn't
else.
have the same,
It's not a professional service.
But the bid can specify, I want voting machine XYZ, I need 47 of them,
Yeah.
and
Or-
whatever other.
But I think, Judge, I think the thing is too, is they know how many precincts, how many polling stations, and then they make the recommendation to us, and they put the price on the page, and then we, based on an interview with them, determine what we want to do. Does that work? Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but I'm wondering, it sounds like maybe Rebecca has already done that. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe you haven't, but have
Well,
you?
to make sure that we're thorough, I like your suggestion of a pre-bid process where we put out what we're looking for and we let those vendors submit that and move forward
Get-
from that.
They can give their recommendations. We don't say we want this, 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 and this, because, you know, this gets so, with what you offer as far as equipment, and service, and location, I think those things are more important than always price. And I'd rather go through the pre-bid and tell them about what you need, and then they come in and tell us what they recommend, and then we vote on the recommendation from whoever we believe is best. I don't know if that can work that way.
From what we are presented by the different companies, then we bid out the specs of the one we like the best. Is that what you're saying, David?
You're asking for a request for proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is what you're asking for.
Yeah.
So we asked whatever vendors, hey, we're out there, come with whatever your best plan. Here's what we need in general.
We did the-
And then we
And just
pick-
like you do with all, you've done it before with other things.
Yeah, we did much the same thing with the steeple on the courthouse.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Yeah, we can
Well,
certainly do that.
Rand and I and Rebecca will work together.
Opposed to Harp Enterprises, it's just
No,
that
not at all.
in the interest of
Do it the right
of
way.
clarity and
Oh.
openness,
And you still get that choice.
Absolutely.
When you do a bid, you lose your choice,
Right.
kind of because you go low
Amber, do you
bid.
remember what they did in '08?
Quality can be an issue.
Judge, just one question. Currently, we've got basically half the votes are going through, you said, through the machine, and the other half are paper being scanned. Well, under this system, every single ballot at every precinct's got to go through that scanner. How much is that going to slow down and increase the line wait times if we just have one of those at each precinct?
It won't, I mean, it's a second and a half. If you're over, you're not gonna have people standing in line. It's not like the East Lake, you still have 10 people. You really want to utilize this machine for any person with disability.
Right.
You're basically getting everyone to go into a privacy booth like you are now, filling out a ballot, walking over here to scan and out the door that they're doing. There shouldn't be a line at
To
the
scan,
scanner
okay.
whatsoever.
Already with the paper ballot system, the only thing that limits the number of voters that we have voting at one time essentially is the manageability of it. We don't like to have more than, 6 to 8 ballots, out there at, in booths that are so that our precinct officers can sufficiently watch what's occurring at the precinct. So I guess my point in that is we already vote like 6 to 1 compared to the East Lake machine with the paper scanner. And that number of 6 is really just determined by what we feel comfortable with the number of privacy booths and the number of ballots that are currently out there in the hands of voters, that our precinct officers can supervise that precinct well. But in a slow election, if you can imagine why we're about 50-50 though, in a slow election, if the voter walks up and there's not a voter at either location and they say whichever, they're as likely to say, oh, I'll vote electronic as well as paper, because there may not be a line there. And that's why I was saying, in a heavy election, we already put a much heavier burden on paper, and that's why, because it's so much more efficient. That's where that goes. So, if we redistricting helps that, because whenever we redistrict, we bring those precincts down to a manageable level, and so that gets remedied. Now, a county that's growing as fast as we are, we develop issues by the time we hit the mark of redistricting, but we can take some exception to that. We can have an allowance to adjust a precinct within that 10 years if necessary. If we show a need for it, we can, request that the state give us the allowance to shape that precinct and downsize it if needed. And then there's the option of potentially adding, an additional scanner or voting machine to alleviate that as well. So I guess my answer to that, there are things that can be done to remedy that. But probably the biggest factor is just redistricting always will bring those precincts back down to a manageable level, so that even in a very high turnout, we should be able to manage it, reasonably.
Any other questions?
I did have a comment on the time frame that we're looking at, and to make sure I'm stating this correctly, we're looking at 2021 being our off year from an election. That would be an optimal time to have these voting machines in place in that year. Anytime that we bring about new technology, which will require new training. Also, the current training materials that we have. A good point was your question Chad, on the what happens if you vote a straight party ballot and then you go outside of that and vote for a candidate of the other party. That's been well recognized, and we know that we need to put that in our training materials to make sure every precinct officer is very clear about how to address voters on that. So along the way, since we've developed training materials for our precinct officers that then filters out to how we're able to educate our voters in the precincts, we recognize what we need to add and modify as we go along. That's a good example of something that we want to add to our training materials. So we have a lot of ideas, that one and a lot of other ideas that we want to put into new training materials, and it's necessary because we now have the e-poll books, and that new technology has come in. We're gradually putting that in our precincts, and that needs to take a big section of our training to make sure all our precinct officers are advised on how to do the electronic poll book versus the paper roster. That training needs to be incorporated. My point in this is, if we know that we're looking at replacing the equipment in the near future, it would be a waste of resources to develop new training materials, which is essential to making sure that elections go smoothly on Election Day. How well we're able to train those 200-plus precinct officers makes a tremendous difference on how smoothly our elections go on Election Day. We need to revise those training materials to accommodate the new technology we already have with the rosters, and we need to improve it, things that we've noticed and taken note of along the way. And we hesitate to do that until we're prepared to do a major part of that training on how to use the equipment. So that off year gives us the time that we're able to put in the time and resources with our staff to be able to develop really good training materials that go along with our new equipment. So as far as time frame, I would like to see these in place by 2021, so that we can spend that year developing really solid training materials for it.
How long does it take to get the equipment generally?
Well, let's just say you all voted today and wanted to place this order. Probably 6-7 weeks.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, we're not looking at something that's got to be done in the next.
And that's probably longer now because there's a lot of jurisdictions with the presidential election that are moving quick, so.
But if she's looking at 2021,
Yeah,
then,
that would,
okay.
at the end, it wouldn't be a problem.
We're projecting well ahead. Also, we don't put on an election in 2021, so what we would normally spend on a primary and a general election, potentially a special election, that could always occur, but what we would normally spend on elections in a given election year, we're not spending that in 2021. So it's a good time to use our resources toward new purchase of equipment.
I appreciate your all's time, and
Thank you.
We'll work more towards what we need to do next steps.
We're projecting it well ahead, but we're trying to give sufficient notice because it does have a substantial price tag on it, and it's we feel very important to moving forward with our elections. So we're
Thank you very
projecting
much.
well ahead. If any of our magistrates or judge, anyone in the courtroom would like to have an opportunity to vote on these machines, we encourage you to do that.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the court have any other business?
No.
Anybody in the audience have any business?
The recycling center will be on the 6th through the 20th due to the maintenance in the election facility. That's where our recyclables go. So.
All right. With that said, then we'll adjourn our meeting. Chad, you're.